You touch me again and you'll regret it. I want to see if her skin is as tough as her attitude. Those were the exact words that billionaire Omar Qureshi muttered before he reached out and ripped her shirt clean down the back in front of over 100 people at one of the most exclusive restaurants in Manhattan. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of violins still playing overhead, like the world hadn't just stopped. But that wasn't the end of it. That was the beginning of something bigger, something unforgettable. This is not just a viral incident. It's not just a clickbait headline. This is a story that shakes you awake. A story about power, racism, and dignity. A story where one young woman's refusal to be broken became a national conversation. Her name is Zoe Miller, 26, waitress, proud and strong, in ways that even she didn't realize until that night. She was just trying to do her job, that's it. Wearing a clean white shirt, black apron, and sneakers from a clearance rack she could barely afford, she smiled at every customer, refilled every glass, dodged every insult that came with a smile and a gold credit card. But Omar, he saw her not as a person, but as something beneath him. And when she didn't laugh at his joke, didn't flirt back, didn't submit, he decided to humiliate her publicly. What he didn't know was that Zoe had trained in Judo since she was 9, that her father, a military vet, taught her not just to defend herself, but to stand for herself. What happened next wasn't rage, it wasn't revenge, it was power. Quiet, precise, undeniable power. And it all happened in front of cameras, in front of the press, in front of the world. You're watching Hidden Worth, where we don't just tell stories, we uncover the strength people tried to bury. If you believe justice should never be silent, hit that like button. Stick around because Zoe's story isn't just inspiring, it's a warning. Now, let me show you exactly what happened moment by moment to understand what happened that night. You need to know where it happened and who Zoe Miller really is. Zoe wasn't born with much. Raised in a small walk-up in the Bronx, she was the kind of person who learned to stretch $10 into 3 meals and make it look like a celebration. Her mom, Eleanor, worked 2 jobs until she got sick. Stage 3, lung cancer. That diagnosis flipped their entire world upside down. With college dreams on pause, Zoe picked up the night shift at the Gilded Spoon, a 5-star French-Asian fusion restaurant nestled in the heart of Manhattan's Upper East Side. Think velvet curtains, $30 cocktails, and a guest list that read like a Forbes cover. You didn't just eat there, you flaunted your presence. The staff wore black-on-black uniforms tailored to perfection. Hair tied back, no visible tattoos, no slang, no mistakes. For most servers, it was just a gig. For Zoe, it was survival. She stood out not just because she was one of the few black women on the floor, but because she glowed. Her posture was upright, her tone always polite, and her smile, it had that rare kind of warmth that made strangers feel seen. But don't mistake poise for passivity. Every night, Zoe dealt with microaggressions that came dressed as compliments. You're so well-spoken. Do you model on the side? You know, you're really articulate for someone from the Bronx. Sometimes they got her order wrong on purpose just to test her. Sometimes they didn't even look her in the eye when ordering, just snapped their fingers or pointed at the menu. Still, Zoe pushed through it because tips paid for chemo, because time was running out. Because dignity wasn't about pretending things were okay, it was about not letting them break you. The Gilded Spoon had rules, unwritten ones. Speak only when spoken to. Smile through everything. Don't ever challenge a guest. The customer is always right, even when they're dead wrong. And that night, as Omar Qureshi walked in, surrounded by bodyguards, models, and whispers of oil money, Zoe did exactly what she was trained to do. She approached with grace. She offered the wine list. She smiled, but even the best training can't prepare you for someone who sees your skin as a license to dehumanize. And what came next? It would burn that smile right off her face. But not for long. At the Gilded Spoon, racism didn't come screaming through the front door. It walked in wearing $1,000 suits, sipped 1,964 Bordeaux, and smiled with perfect teeth. It wasn't loud. It was polite, polished, sanitized, and that's what made it so exhausting. Zoe dealt with it every night. It came in the form of backhanded compliments and loaded questions. You're too pretty to be a waitress. Who are you really? Or worse, do you all do your hair like that where you're from? Sometimes it was the older women who clutched their purses a little tighter when she walked by. Sometimes it was the businessmen who never remembered her name. Even after she served them every Thursday for months, she was always just Miss or Hey, you. And then there were the tips. She could give flawless service, memorize orders, recommend the perfect wine, fold napkins like origami, and still walk away with $5 and a condescending smile. But she never snapped, not once. Because women like Zoe don't get to break down. They get labeled aggressive, ungrateful, difficult. So she swallowed it, smiled, and kept going. The worst were the ones who thought they were helping. I don't see color, they'd say, while ignoring the way others treated her. Or, I voted for Obama twice, as if that somehow gave them a pass to say anything they wanted. And the management, they were no better. If Zoe ever brought up a complaint, she'd hear, "Don't make this about race," or "He's a regular, let it slide." They'd praise her for being graceful under pressure, but what they really meant was, "Thanks for not making us uncomfortable." And that's the thing. Racism in places like the Gilded Spoon wasn't about shouting slurs. It was about knowing your place, being good, being silent. But Zoe wasn't raised to be silent. Her mom taught her that the world might not love her, but it would respect her. Still, respect felt like a luxury when you were clocking out with sore feet and an aching back, only to catch a cab at 1 a.m. with $10 in your pocket and someone else's lipstick stain on your tray. And every night, Zoe asked herself the same question: is this just how it is, or is there ever a breaking point? That question would be answered sooner than she thought. The first time Zoe saw Omar Qureshi, he didn't walk in like a guest. He entered like a performance. It was a Friday evening just after 8 p.m. The dinner rush was peaking. Zoe was carrying a tray with 2 seared duck breasts and a bottle of Malbec when the doors opened and the room fell into a strange hush. That's how power walks in, quietly but demanding attention. Omar was dressed in an all-black tailored suit, no tie, gold cufflinks, and leather shoes that didn't make a sound on the marble floor. He didn't come alone. A ring of men followed, bodyguards, assistants, someone live-streaming for social media. 2 women trailed behind, dressed like runway models, eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses, despite it being night. He didn't wait for the host. He didn't look around. He simply nodded, and the best table, already reserved for someone else, was cleared without a word. When Zoe was asked to serve that table, her stomach tensed. Not because she recognized him, she didn't, but because of the way he looked at her. Not like a person, not like a server, like an object. She approached the table and began her usual introduction, polished and professional. Before she could finish, Omar raised a hand and cut her off mid-sentence. "You are not from here, are you?" he asked, voice low, eyes scanning her like merchandise. Zoe kept her tone steady. "I was born in the Bronx, sir." A slow smile spread across his face, beautiful and so well-trained. The table chuckled. Someone whispered something in Arabic. Zoe didn't understand it, but she understood the tone. She'd heard it before. She poured the wine with perfect control, but Omar wasn't watching the wine. His gaze stayed on her chest, then her hands, then her waist. When she moved to step away, he leaned in just slightly and said, "You know, back where I'm from, girls like you are considered very flexible." Polished disgust. That's what it was. Not crude, not angry, just dripping with entitlement, wrapped in a suit and cologne that cost more than Zoe's rent. She said nothing, just nodded and left the table. But her heart was pounding, not in fear, in warning. Something about Omar was different. Not just powerful, not just wealthy. He enjoyed crossing the line. And Zoe sensed that tonight he might push it further than anyone had before. From the moment Omar sat down, Zoe knew he wasn't just another rude customer. He was playing a game, and the stakes were invisible, but very real. He didn't yell. He didn't raise his voice. Instead, he twisted the rules in quiet, calculated ways. The first thing he did was challenge her knowledge of the menu. "This wine," he said, tapping the list with a manicured finger. "Tell me where it was bottled, what altitude the grapes were grown at, and what year the climate shifted." He wasn't curious. He was testing her in front of his entourage, smirking, waiting for her to slip up. But she didn't. Zoe had studied that menu like scripture. She gave him the answer. Calm, precise, professional. He smiled, but not in admiration. Impressive for a waitress. Then came the custom orders. Omar sent back his appetizer twice. The first time it was too cold, the second too hot. He insisted on changing servers, then quickly reversed it, saying, "No, let's keep her. I like her energy." By then, Zoe felt the tension in her neck building. She wasn't just being harassed. She was being studied. Every reaction, every pause, every blink, he was waiting for her to break. When she brought the main course, Omar leaned back and accidentally spilled a glass of red wine across her uniform. Not a drop on the tablecloth, just a perfect streak across her white shirt. "Oh," he said with mock surprise, "my hand must have slipped." His guests laughed, not because it was funny, but because he laughed, and no one dared do otherwise. Zoe stood frozen for a second, crimson liquid soaking through her chest. She felt the heat of shame rise, but she swallowed it, grabbed a towel, cleaned up. "Would you like another glass, sir?" she asked, steady as steel. That moment was her line in the sand. Omar nodded slowly. "You're hard to rattle. I like that." Then he leaned in again and whispered, just loud enough for her to hear, "But everyone has a breaking point. This wasn't about flirtation. It wasn't about service. This was about power, control. A billionaire trying to remind a young black woman where she stood and daring her to challenge it." And even though Zoe didn't show it on her face, something inside her had shifted. It was no longer about finishing the shift. It was about surviving it with her dignity intact. It happened in less than 10 seconds. But for Zoe, it felt like the longest moment of her life. The table was laughing again, some offhand joke Omar made at her expense. Zoe had just returned from the kitchen with a new set of steak knives. She set them down one by one, still wearing the stained shirt from earlier. No time to change, no backup uniform. She had simply wiped it with club soda and kept moving. Omar watched her closely. Not the way most people watch servers. His eyes weren't focused on her hands or the table. They were locked on her chest, her neckline, her shirt. "You know," he said casually, swirling the last drops of wine in his glass. "Where I come from, when a woman refuses to smile, we assume she wants attention." Zoe didn't respond. She'd learned not to. The safest answer was silence. But Omar wasn't looking for answers. He was looking for submission. So without warning, he stood up. The sudden movement caught the room's attention. Conversations at nearby tables dipped. Some turned their heads. Others pulled out phones just in case something Instagram-worthy was about to happen. He walked around the table and stood behind Zoe, too close. She stiffened, and then with a single hand he grabbed the back of her shirt and ripped it down the middle. The sound was sharp, fabric tearing under force. Her shoulders jerked forward instinctively as the cool air hit her skin. Gasps echoed across the room. Forks paused mid-air. Wine glasses tilted in hands. Even the string quartet playing in the corner missed a few notes. Omar chuckled, stepping back, arms raised mockingly like it was all a joke. "She's wearing too much anyway," he said to no one in particular. Zoe didn't move for a heartbeat. It was like the whole room was holding its breath. No one stepped in. Not the manager, not the guests, not even the bodyguards who stood watching like it was just another show. But Zoe, She took one breath in, slow, deep, centered. Her eyes closed just for a moment, and when they opened again, the air had changed. She wasn't afraid. She was done. And what happened next would not only shock the room, but go viral across the entire country by morning. For half a second, no one moved. Omar was still smirking, standing just a step behind her, arms slightly raised like the star of a cruel magic trick. Around him, silence rippled like a slow-motion wave. People were watching, phones half raised, mouths open, unsure whether to laugh or intervene. And then something shifted. Zoe's breath slowed. Her shoulders dropped, not in defeat, but in focus. Every muscle remembered something her father had drilled into her since she was a child. "You don't react," he used to say. "You respond with precision." In one swift movement, Zoe spun on the balls of her feet, closed the gap between her and Omar, and snapped into position. Her right hand gripped his wrist. Her left arm cut under his elbow and wrapped across his back. Her right foot slid behind his ankle, anchoring him in place. It all happened so fast, no one in the room even registered what was happening until it was done. With a clean pivot of her hips and a burst of centered gravity, Zoe executed a textbook judo throw, taio toshi, the kind you see in Olympic slow-motion replays. Omar's body lifted off the ground, his weight undone by pure technique. He landed hard on the marble floor with a sound that cracked through the room like lightning. The impact echoed off the glass walls. The table behind him rattled. A fork fell to the ground. He groaned, stunned, not just by pain, but by humiliation. His entourage froze. His bodyguards didn't move. They weren't trained for this kind of power. Zoe stood over him, calm, grounded. A tear still ran down the back of her shirt, but her dignity, it was untouched. She looked down at him, met his dazed eyes, and said clear as glass, "You wanted to see if my skin was tough. Now you know." The room stayed still, and then someone clapped, soft, hesitant. Another joined, and then more. A ripple of applause spread through the dining hall, not explosive, but affirming, a kind of slow-building acknowledgement that something real had just happened, something no one in that room would forget. Zoe didn't linger. She turned and walked out past the stunned waitstaff, past the manager's gaping mouth, past the glittering chandeliers. She didn't need a spotlight. She was the moment. Outside, the city was still buzzing. But inside that room, something had shifted forever. What Omar tried to take from her, her confidence, her peace, her control, he ended up handing back in full view of everyone. And what no one knew, not yet at least, was that 3 different angles of that moment had already hit social media. The world was about to meet Zoe Miller, and the world would never forget her. By sunrise, the internet was already on fire. 3 different diners had filmed the moment from 3 different angles, one vertical, one wide, and one in slow motion, thanks to the latest iPhone's cinematic mode. Within hours, all 3 videos hit social media, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and were stitched, clipped, captioned, and reposted faster than anyone could count. The most shared version had a bold caption that read, "Black waitress body slams billionaire after he rips her shirt." Underneath it, a simple hashtag began to trend, number justice for Zoe. By noon, it had 20 million views. Talk shows scrambled to get the story. News anchors debated the moment frame by frame like it was a Super Bowl highlight. Commentators on cable news leaned into their usual sides, some applauding her strength, others questioning if it was too aggressive. But the internet didn't hesitate. People recognized what they saw. This wasn't just about a judo throw. This was about something much deeper, something millions had felt but never seen, expressed so cleanly, so undeniably, so powerfully. It became more than a video. It became a symbol. Zoe Miller. The name itself became a banner for anyone who'd ever felt small in a room full of power, who'd ever been humiliated and told to smile through it, who'd ever been reduced to skin color or gender or income level. Celebrities reposted the clip. Activists shared her story. Women across the country began opening up about their own experiences in high-end restaurants, private jets, and luxury boardrooms. The hashtag reached Europe, then Africa, then the Middle East. A split-second decision in a Manhattan restaurant had become a global conversation. And what about Omar? His PR team went dark. No statement, no apology, but the internet did its job. Old headlines started resurfacing, whispers of other incidents, NDA settlements. Rumors that had once been buried under gold-plated contracts now floated freely through Reddit threads and investigative tweets. People weren't just watching the fall of a billionaire, they were watching the rise of a woman who refused to stay silent. Zoe, meanwhile, had turned off her phone. She wasn't reading comments. She was at the hospital with her mother, helping her eat soup and laughing through the quiet like it was any other day. Because for Zoe, this wasn't about fame. It was about freedom. At first, Omar Qureshi's team tried to spin the story. They claimed it was a misunderstanding, that the video was taken out of context, and that legal action would be pursued. But the internet had already moved beyond PR statements. People weren't just watching, they were digging. Within days, investigative journalists and digital sleuths began pulling threads that had been quietly swept under expensive rugs for years. And what they found was chilling. It started with whispers. A 2018 settlement in Dubai, sealed, undisclosed. Then another case in London, buried in private arbitration. Different women, different countries, same pattern, same silence. A former housekeeper spoke anonymously through a podcast. Her voice altered for protection. "He didn't hit me," she said, "but he made me feel like I didn't exist, like I was decoration. And when I spoke up, they made sure I disappeared." Then came a damning report from an ex-employee of Omar's oil conglomerate. She shared emails, internal memos that hinted at disciplinary agreements and reputational containment. It became clear Omar didn't just have money, he had systems in place to erase accountability. But the most devastating blow came when a former model named Chloe Sinclair broke her silence. She had met Omar at a fashion gala in Milan 5 years earlier. For months, she tried to speak out, tried to tell her story, but nobody wanted to take on a man whose net worth floated somewhere between $4 and $6 billion. "No one believed me," Chloe said in a now viral interview. Until Zoe. She watched the judo throw like it was a personal vindication. "She did in 1 second what I couldn't do in 5 years, make the world see him." Suddenly, the media narrative shifted. Omar wasn't a misunderstood billionaire anymore. He was a pattern, and people were connecting the dots. Lawsuits were reopened. NGOs demanded investigation. Brands quietly began removing his name from donor walls and charity galas. His empire, built on oil, silence, and fear, had sprung its first public leak, and it was flooding fast. And through it all, Zoe remained silent. She didn't tweet. She didn't go live. She didn't sell a single interview, because her story wasn't about attention, it was about truth. And now that truth was finally louder than his money, the Gilded Spoon had never been quieter. Not during brunch, not during dinner service, not even during the blackout of 2021, when the lights went out and candles had to be lit table by table. But after the video of Zoe's judo throw went viral, the silence wasn't just about electricity, it was about reckoning. For years, the restaurant had run like a finely tuned machine. Impeccable service, 5-star reviews, Michelin whisperings. But beneath the polished silverware and curated wine list, there was something rotten, and now the world had seen it. The general manager, Arthur Stone, was the first to go. He had stood just a few feet away when Omar ripped Zoe's shirt. He hadn't stepped in. He hadn't called security. He hadn't even apologized after. When reporters asked why, all he could say was, "I didn't want to escalate things." That line became a meme. Within a week, he was gone, resigned to pursue other opportunities, though insiders say it wasn't voluntary. After that, the changes came fast. The restaurant launched a mandatory racial sensitivity and anti-harassment training program for all employees. Not the kind they do once and forget, but a full series with real instructors, real workshops, and real accountability. A new code of conduct was implemented, not just for staff, but for guests. It was printed right on the back of the menu. Respect is non-negotiable. Security protocols were upgraded. Body cameras were issued to floor managers. Hidden panic buttons were installed under hostess stands and near exits. But the biggest shift, the staff. For the first time in the Gilded Spoon history, a black woman was offered a lead supervisory role on the floor. Her name was Zoe Miller. At first, she said no. She didn't want to become a mascot for progress. But after a few days and a long talk with her mother, she changed her mind. Maybe, she said, I can be the reason another girl like me doesn't walk into this building afraid. She took the role on one condition. She wouldn't just supervise, she would mentor. Every Friday before dinner service, she gathered the younger staff in the back room. No lectures, just real talk about power, boundaries, courage, self-worth. And slowly, the air inside the Gilded Spoon began to feel different. Not perfect, but human. And for the first time, respect didn't depend on what you wore or what you ordered, but how you treated the person serving you. Zoe never imagined her name would be in headlines. Not the fashion kind, not the political kind, certainly not the kind that made people cry in front of their phones. She had only wanted to finish her shift, pay the electric bill, and make it to her mom's next appointment. But that judo throw, that split-second decision, had unlocked something far bigger than viral fame. It sparked a movement. The world didn't just see a waitress defending herself. They saw every woman who'd been cornered in silence, every worker who smiled through insult, every person who'd swallowed disrespect just to survive the day. In Zoe, they saw something they didn't know. They needed permission to say enough. She didn't start out wanting to be a symbol, but when people began reaching out, survivors, activists, teachers, kids, Zoe did what she had always done. She showed up. She didn't take the big interview deals. She didn't cash in on the moment. When one news anchor offered her $50,000 for an exclusive, she turned it down with a simple reply, "I'm not for sale." Instead, she used her voice quietly but purposefully. At a local school gym, she started Grounded, a free weekly meetup for anyone who wanted to learn basic self-defense and something deeper. How to hold your space, how to say no, how to stand firm even when no one's watching. What started as 6 women in a circle became 60, then 600 on a wait list. She brought in guest speakers, therapists, social workers, martial artists, not celebrities, just people who knew how hard it was to be underestimated, ignored, or talked over. Soon, murals of her appeared in places she'd never been. New Orleans, Portland, even outside a subway station in Toronto. Her torn shirt had become a symbol not of violence, but of resistance with dignity. Kids began dressing as her for Halloween. Teenagers posted videos recreating her judo move, not for likes, but to feel capable. And still Zoe stayed grounded. She paid off her mom's medical debt. She saved up for night school. She worked 2 shifts a week at the Gilded Spoon. Not because she had to, but because she wanted the next young black woman walking through those kitchen doors to see her there. When asked if she ever regretted throwing Omar to the floor, she smiled softly and said, "No, because I didn't throw him down to hurt him. I did it to stand up for myself." And in standing up for herself, she helped millions stand with her. She had become a symbol, not of fear, but of what happens when one person decides their worth is no longer up for debate. The moment Omar hit the floor wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of something bigger. Because what happened at the Gilded Spoon that night wasn't just about one man's ego or one woman's courage. It was about something millions of people feel every day but don't always have the words for: disrespect that hides behind money, silence that gets mistaken for weakness, and power that people assume they can take from you just because they can afford to. But Zoe showed the world something different. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't demand attention. She just refused to accept less than she deserved. And that right there, that quiet decision to stand her ground with dignity and precision, is the lesson we're left with. It's not about being violent. It's about being clear. Clear about what you will and won't tolerate. Clear about your boundaries. Clear about the fact that no one, not a billionaire, not a boss, not anyone, is entitled to your body, your silence, or your fear. Zoe's story is proof that strength doesn't have to look like aggression. Sometimes it looks like stillness, like breathing through anger, like walking back into the fire with your head up and your heart intact. That's what courage really is. It's not just reacting, it's responding with purpose. And for everyone watching, everyone who's been talked over, laughed at, cornered, or dismissed because of the color of their skin or the uniform they wear, remember this. Your worth is not defined by your paycheck or your title or your past. It is yours, and no one has the right to tear it from you. So the next time you're in a situation that makes you feel small, remember Zoe. Remember the power of a deep breath, a firm stance, and a quiet refusal to be humiliated. Because the world doesn't change when we scream the loudest. It changes when we finally say, enough. You've been watching Hidden Worth, the place where untold stories finally get the light they deserve. If this story hit you deep, if you felt it in your chest or thought of someone who needs to hear it, go ahead and like this video. Subscribe for more real stories that cut through the noise, and share this with a friend who needs to be reminded. They're seen, they're powerful, and they're more than enough. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, stay strong, stay grounded, and always protect your hidden worth.